they're just remains of something that existed before. Such as flightless birds. Or what about blind cave animals? They got eyes, but their eyes are blind. And that's why they say, now these are vestigial organs. They're organs on the way out. At one time, that animal had sight. Now he's beginning to evolve into some higher species. He's still got his eyes, but the thing is blind. Or they'll go to the birds. You see, we've got, I don't know, a half a dozen birds, I guess, around in the world today that have wings, but they can't fly. Very interesting there. Now these are vestigial organs. They once could fly, and now they're going on beyond that to grow up into something even higher. So what do we say about examples like that? Well, two things we can say about vestigial organs. One thing is that they could be caused by a gene malfunction, or such a thing, which is more prevalent than that, more easily to believe, is that these vestigial organs are due to a particular geographical region. Now, did you know that practically all flightless birds live on islands? It's interesting. Practically all flightless birds live on islands. And a lot of them live on very small islands. Now, sure, they could fly at one time. You know what? And this certainly can happen. And all of this, of course, now is because of the fall. We trace it back there. They've lived on an island for centuries and centuries. They don't need to fly on that island anymore. Therefore, they stop flying. You know what happens after a while if you stop using something? You can't use it anymore. Now, is that because he's evolving? No, it's because of his particular geographic region where he's found. And you know what? There are a few birds that are found, flightless birds that are found on continents, such as your ostrich. Guess what we can say about them? All of them. They're all extremely fast runners. You see, they have picked up something else to be able to make up for their lack of flight, whatever caused their lack of flight. They practically all are very fast runners. You see, on an island where you've got just rocky beach there, and you've got a lot of birds, you don't really have any predators around. They don't have to get away from anything. But you live on a big continent, like Australia or something, and you're a big bird like an ostrich, regardless of why he lost the ability to fly, doesn't mean that that's evolution in process. He has been able to run very fast. The same thing is true with animals that live in caves. You go somewhere where it's dark all the time, and you're not going to be able to see after several thousand years yourself. You lose the ability to see. You never use the retina anymore. Never use it at all. And you see, we don't deny, and the Bible doesn't deny, that there are different means of adaptation that God has put in the animal kingdom, such as in bats, whereby, regardless of whether they can see or not, they can adapt by other means to their surrounding, by, of course, what's known in bats as their radar. And they can send out radar just like you and I could send out radar. And therefore, he can still get around. But see, here's the thing, friends, that bat's still never grown up to a hippopotamus. I don't care if he loses his wings and everything. He'll never become anything but a bat. He's just going to stay a bat. Let's say the bird loses its wings and it stops laying eggs and it starts having live birth. It'll never change it from being an ostrich, though. It can put on a different dress. It can walk a different way. It can fly a different way or not fly a different way. It'll never become a crocodile, though. It's just going to stay walking around an ostrich. That's what they never think of. They're trying to point to these little things and say, well, see, there's evolution. But show me an ostrich, show me any bird that's lost its flight that ever became a giraffe afterwards. Never has done that yet. Never has done that. You have a question? No, it's come about as a result of the fall and as a result of the flood, too. Cover that more later on, isolation. The other thing that they'll point to is what about male breasts? Now, males, you get a 5-year-old male and a 5-year-old female. Now, they're not the same, but from the looks, their breasts are exactly the same. Now, the female, she grows up and hers is developed. The male grows up and his doesn't do anything, doesn't develop at all. Well, they say, well, see there, we got one of two things. Either the female's used not to develop and she's evolving, or either the male's did used to develop and he's devolving now because his doesn't develop anymore. And they'll point to your appendix. What good is your appendix there? They're always yanking them out of people. What good is that thing anyway? Hundreds of different items like that. But until they're God and they know all of the whys and wheres about these things, I'm not going to let them confuse me about things like that. As a matter of fact, it's been proven that the breasts, I'm talking about a human, whether in a male or a female, are very essential in the development of the child while they're still in the womb. Now, the whys and wherefores about that, I don't know. But neither does anyone else either. But just because they have something that appears not to have developed like others doesn't mean that we've got evolution in process. No, they can't prove that, but you see, that's the whole implication there. That's what they're getting at. Why would you have a creature with eyes if he can't see? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Could it possibly that those particular organs serve a different purpose if they don't know it?
No. If you've got a bird and he's got wings, then he's supposed to be flying. For sure. Another thing tied in with this, what can we say about the two sexes that we have in practically all species today? Some things reproduce asexually. Most things reproduce sexually. Now, how did that little amoeba know to evolve into two sexes that fit together perfectly? Why not? You see, you and I can't think of anything but two sexes. Why aren't there six sexes, though? Why aren't there six sexes? Why are there two? Why is there a female and a male? And to get specific, why are there sexual organs made in such a way they fit perfectly together? Now, how can you explain that? You're going to explain that by chance? You're a fool if you try to. Just taking human beings, for example. Why is it that the sexual organs of the male and female match each other perfectly? They were made for each other, or they evolved for each other, one or the other. But you don't know of any females born with male sexual organs. Now, why isn't it? Why is it that females are always females and males are always males? I mean, that's enough of an answer right there. Just the sexes. Why aren't there 12 or 15 sexes? Why are there only two? And there's a male and there's a female, and they go together. You don't get two males together or two females. Or some people do, but you're not supposed to. And you get a female and you get a male together, and they reproduce and produce some more just like themselves. They don't reproduce amoebas or something like that. They go and reproduce themselves all over again. And their children will grow up, a male and a female. They'll get together. They'll reproduce again. You get two males together, two females together, they can't reproduce anything. But you get the two sexes together, you've got reproduction on your hands. Another item, I think somebody called that the birds and the bees, but we just covered the birds then, and the bees are still to come here. That's just called the two sexes, I guess. Evolution cannot explain the extremely intricate adaptations and interrelationships which exist in living species. It can't explain the intricate adaptations and interrelationships which exist in living species. I've just jotted down several examples here to give you. First of all, you ever heard of the rhinoceros bird? How many of you ever heard of the rhinoceros bird? One of you? Rhinoceros bird, two of you? Rhinoceros bird, very smart. And what we're saying here is that evolution can't explain how he can interrelate and adapt his needs with the needs of our rhinoceros. What the rhinoceros will do after he's finished eating, he'll just sit there and open up his mouth. You see the same thing in crocodiles. A certain bird that'll do this in crocodiles. He'll open up his mouth, Now, you're not going to find an eagle or a vulture flying in there. Only find one bird that goes in there, and it's a rhinoceros bird. You know what he'll do? He'll go sit in there and hop up on his teeth and peck all of his teeth clean for him. And you know what? That rhinoceros won't even close up his mouth. He'll just sit there. That little bird will peck his teeth clean, but if there's danger around, you know how he pays him back? You've always got the interrelationship. He'll warn that rhinoceros, because see, a rhinoceros can't see for anything. He'll warn him, you better run. And he makes a certain noise and tells the rhinoceros, you better run. And that rhinoceros will take off running then. And the bird, of course, will have to fly away. He's got to close his mouth to run, or he'd get a sore throat, I guess, after a while. Another example, you know what witchweed is? Witchweed is a corn parasite. And it's a little parasite, witchweed. Witchweed can and will and does lie dormant in the ground for up to 20 years. Lies dormant there for up to 20 years, waiting for a host plant, that is a corn plant, to somehow get near that parasite and shoot down roots. And as soon as that thing shoots down root, it'll just destroy that corn just like that. And it'll sit there for 20 years waiting. Now, it'll die eventually, but it'll sit there 20 years dormant, waiting for corn to be planted there. And as soon as you plant corn there, it'll go up in those roots and destroy that corn stalk. And you know what you can do to that? How nature itself is going to protect corn? If you plant soybeans, or what's the other thing? Sunflower. If you plant soybeans or sunflower next to that witchweed, it's going to see their roots, and it goes up after their roots too. And as soon as it goes up and eats their roots, the soybean kills the witchweed, and it dies after that. Adapted, the one to the other. I mean, there are just dozens of examples. I just picked out a few to give you. Another one is the spider and the Malaya pitcher plant. Maybe some of you have heard of that. That's a little more, it's been advertised anyway. You've seen it in National Geographic magazines. The spider that goes along with the Malaya pitcher plant. Now, the Malaya pitcher plant has a little cup in the bottom of it just full of a deadly poison there. And all you got to do is get insects to fall in that thing, and it kills them just like that, and it dissolves the insects, and that's how it gets its food, and that's how it begins to grow. I mean, like a Venus flytrap or something. And it's got that little pool of poison there at the bottom. So what that spider will do, and it's only one spider. It's not a black widow or a tarantula or something like that. It's only one spider that goes with the Malaya pitcher plant, and he knows how to find the Malaya pitcher plant, and he hops in that Malaya pitcher plant, sits at the very top of it, and whenever insects go by, he catches the best insects, the ones that he wants, and all of his droppings that he leaves drops down in there, and of course that's still food for the plant. It drops down into that poison. That poison still dissolves his droppings from the spider, the leftovers from the spider, and it still gets nourishment. So there you've got the spider giving food to the plant. Now the thing about this particular spider is when any danger comes around, such as a bird coming after that thing, that spider can drop himself down in that deadly poison, and he's covered with a particular type of hair that wraps all around his body, and poison won't harm him at all. And he's the only spider that can drop down in there. He'll drop down in that poison, that bird will look around, he's not going to touch that poison down in that Malaya pitcher plant. As soon as the bird leaves, he can come back up out of there and shake himself off, and he can shake all that poison off of him. Fascinating. Just because of those particular hairs that he has on himself. Another thing we can say under this interrelationship and adaptation concerns coloration. That is the coloring in animals. Now we know that in part, and only in part, is coloring or coloration caused by pigment, a substance known as pigment. In all plants and animals and humans and so forth, you have a substance known as pigment, and this in part is what causes coloration. But the interesting thing here is, why is it, you see, evolution just in 100 years can't explain these intricate details here. Why is it that a robin can have pigment in him, and the pigment knows to color the robin's egg blue whenever it drops out of the bird, but it doesn't color the bird blue anywhere found on the bird? Of course, on the back of it, it's a dark color. On the front, you've got an orange color. You won't find any blue on a robin, but their eggs are solid blue. Now, how does that pigment know, now I'm supposed to color the egg, but don't color this bird blue, though? That's what pigment does. That's part of its function there. And they've even been able to look inside the ovaries of these animals, and they still can't find any pigment inside the ovaries. Now you'd think now if the pigment's in the ovary, then obviously it'd know I'm supposed to color the egg and not the head or the beak. It's not in the ovaries. They don't know where it is. But it still knows those eggs. And see, a robin will never lay a red egg. It'll never do that. Never lay a red egg. It's always blue. Now why is it always blue? I mean, they just beat their heads against the wall trying to explain these things, and it's something they really can never do. Another thing even greater than this adaptation and interrelationship is that, I guess we're on number 11 here, evolution can never explain the mystery of instinct. The mystery of instinct. And of course, instinct is totally infallible. Instinct can never go wrong. Instinct is always infallible. Now, if you think you've got a leading of the Spirit by instinct or something, it goes wrong. That just shows it wasn't instinct there. But instinct can never tell you the wrong answer. It always tells you what's right. Just some common examples. What about the monarch butterfly? All of you I know have heard about the monarch butterfly. How does that butterfly by instinct know to go back to that same valley down there in Mexico every time? I saw that not long ago on the news, and just hundreds of thousands of monarch butterflies right in a little tiny valley in Mexico. And they don't come to Waconia. What makes them go to Mexico rather than Waconia? Or to Mexico rather than Florida if they want another warm place? The Alaska salmon does the same thing. It, of course, is born there in a river. Then the salmon goes out to the ocean, out to the sea, and then it knows how to come back in there and find the exact place where it was born, and the process starts all over again. And it can find the exact place it was born. All this, of course, we're saying is by instinct. This is not something that you learn. You ever seen bugs when they get inside like a moth? What does he do? He spins around and around the light, doesn't he? He goes around and around that light. And if it's a candle flame, I'm sure all of you have seen this if you've been out camping, if you've got a candle flame, he'll go around and around that and get so close, he'll kill himself. He'll go right up in that fire and kill himself. You know why they do that? It's because of what's known as the arc instinct of the sun, ARC. They can fly perfectly by zeroing in on the sun. Doesn't matter whether it's a cloudy or sunny day for some of them, but by the arc of the sun in the sky, they're able to travel about. But when you have a localized light, like your light on your ceiling or a candle, it confuses them. And you see their instinct, it can't correspond to that because that instinct was built in to tell them how to fly on the basis of the sun infallibly. Now, if you don't have the sun around for a certain types of moths and things like that, and you've got a light like this, he's confused and he goes just around and around in circles. You don't see them generally fly away into a dark part of the house. They all come from the dark part of the house into the light part of the house, and they'll go around and around that light. Crickets. You know crickets, if you've ever laid awake on a summer night, they're excellent musicians. But you know what? They're always right-winged. They always play their fiddle with their right wing. And that's how they make their sound, is by playing the fiddle on the right wing. If you tie that right wing, he can't make a sound. You can leave the left one free. But all of them know how to play, and they know how to play from birth, too. And they always do it with their right wing. No one had to teach them to play the fiddle on the right wing and not on the left one. They just know how to do that. Young spiders, as soon as they're born, can always make a web. Even the males can make a web. And of course, later on in life, that's the thing the male hates to do the most. He refuses to make the web. It's always the female that makes the web. But when he's young, he can make a web and does make one just like the female will. And he can do it without anyone teaching him. Another thing called the fur seal, which is born up in the Arctic, kind of like the Alaska salmon. And of course, once he's born, then he takes off for the Atlantic and the South Atlantic. And when it's time to go back and have their young, they travel 3,000 miles, and they can do it all the way through the Arctic fog that surrounds the Arctic there. They can go through the fog, and generally they end up at the identical spot where they were born, and generally they end up on the exact same day of the year. It's the exact same day that they end up back there all over again. See, they don't have anything to tell them to do these things except instinct. And that's something that's been built into them. A California woodpecker. California woodpecker selects a certain oak tree. A whole colony of these woodpeckers will all within several mile radius select only one particular oak tree, and all of them will drill a hole in the oak tree. Then all the woodpeckers will leave. They'll go get an acorn. They all come back to the oak tree. They all stick the acorn in the hole. Then they all leave. And to the day, they come back a year later and crack the acorn and eat it. And all of them come back together, and all of them come back on the same day. And they'll do that to the same tree for up to 50 years. They have been watched by means of, diary, journal entries, watching them. And they'll come back to the same tree up to 50 years, keep putting the acorn in, come back next year, take it out and eat it, and of course put another one in, come back the next year, take it out and eat it, on and on and on. To get to humans, what about a baby going to its mother's breast a few days after birth? Do you have to give it a class? Now it's time to suck in. No, the baby knows to do that. How does it know to do that? Never been taught to do that before. And of course there are many instincts in human. One instinct is to swallow. It's just reflex that you swallow. But you don't have to be taught, now it's time to swallow. You just do that. I mean, there are some things you have to be taught how to walk. But there are a lot of things that you just do. Another example here, a final example on this one of instinct, is one of the most amazing ones concerns the bees. Now, bees and ants, of course, are known as your social insects because they gather together in such large colonies and quantities to do whatever they have to do. And it's amazing that your bees, now they're going to only travel on a sunny day. It's remarkable you don't see bees for the most part out on flowers on a cloudy day because their path is guided by the sun. It of course depends on how thick the clouds are on whether they can get through to the sun and find out how they're supposed to go. But you'll see bees out most of the time on a sunny day. Now whenever a bee finds honey, let's say, in a place, let's say he finds some nectar in a place. The bees would have already been at the honey earlier. Let's say that he finds a large patch of flowers somewhere, and it's a single bee out there. Some of you know what he does? He goes back to the beehive. You know what he does when he gets there? He knows how to do a dance. And he'll do that dance, and they've been able to slice a comb open, and you can see what they're doing in there. As soon as he comes in, he reports back to headquarters. And you've got your worker bees, you've got your queen bee. They all know what they're supposed to do. And when this scout comes back in, he comes back into the beehive. He gets up on his little legs, and there he goes dancing around and around. He'll tell them how far away the nectar is, even allowing for any hills they have to go over, which would mean more flight if you've got to go over a hill. He'll tell them how many hills to go over, and he'll tell them how much nectar is there. In other words, should we send out the whole bunch or just a small group of us here? Tell you how many to send out. I mean, if there's only 2 flowers, he's just going to say, we just got a little bit over here. Send out, a half a dozen of us. We'll go over there and take care of it. He'll do that in a little dance, and those things will just take off out of that hive and go find that nectar. How do they do that again? They've never been taught, never had a class on how to dance. They've simply been taught that by instinct. 12thly and finally, evolution cannot explain the perfect balance of cause and effect which exists in the world. One thing I forgot to mention on the coloration that I found interesting, I have to go back to. You've got animals like zebras, black and white stripes on them. Leopards, you've got the spots on them. Tigers, you've got the yellow and orange swirls and different things on them. But you know what? If you shaved all their hair off of them, you just end up with just a body there. But you know what? Whenever it grows back, it's going to grow back with the same band. It's going to have a white band, then a black one. You're not going to have a black one, and then it forgets to put a white one, and another black one, and then another black one, and then finally the white one remembers to come in. Why is it? It knows on each part of skin, now I'm supposed to be a white hair rather than a black hair. Let's say on a zebra. How does it know that? This hair says, I'm supposed to be white. And the one next to him, until you get a band say that much. And then the very next one says, no, I can't be like the one beside me. I've got to be black. And he turns black. Now, they don't think like this. I mean, that's just what happens. He's black. All the ones beside him, until you go over far enough, that one says, oh, it's time to be white again. He changes white again. Black, white, on and on and on. The color of the animal. Something that coloration you just can't explain. Now, I sit here on this last point that you can't explain the perfect balance of cause and effect. One good example of this is the hydraulic water cycle that exists in the world today. The hydraulic water cycle, by which hundreds of millions of tons of water are lifted from the surface of the earth every day of the year. They're lifted, they go back up to the clouds, then at a certain point they turn to water again, they come back down the earth, then pretty soon it's time to go back up again, they go back up again, they come back down again, and you never run out of it. You still got water all the time. It comes down, it evaporates, you think, well, don't have any water. It's still there, but it's up in the sky again. When it reaches a certain point of saturation, then here it comes down again. And it'll come down on the top of the mountain as snow. The snow will melt and go into the river. The river will run down into the sea, and the sea will evaporate back into the sky. And the cloud will go back over the mountain, and it'll snow on the mountain again, and it'll put water back in the river, and it'll put water back in the sea, and it'll put water back in the sky. Hydraulic water cycle, round and around and around. And you know what? There's no machinery on earth that could lift that much water into the sky. Only evaporation can do it. See, that's how it does it, by evaporation. And you know how much water weighs. I mean, you carry a big bucket full of water, that can weigh a lot. And we don't have any power on earth that can lift millions of tons of water up into the sky. I mean, it's like lifting Lake Waconia. You couldn't lift that lake. Lift it up into the sky and hold it up there for a while. You couldn't do that. But evaporation can lift that whole lake. I mean, it lifts a lot more than that. Millions of tons of water up in the sky. And it just holds it up there. When it's time to come down, then here it comes down. I mean, sometimes it really comes down. Turn over to Acts 17. The evolutionists basically, friends, have classified themselves in the very lowest form of idolatry, because they are attempting to give life to non-living subjects. And that's about the lowest form of idolatry that you can have. Trying to give life to non-living subjects. Listen to what Paul said in Acts 17:28. For in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Forasmuch then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone graven by art and man's device. Trying to make a living substance out of non-living dead matter. Psalm 115. The whole psalm here directed against that. We'll close reading Psalm 115. They are classifying themselves. It's not we who are doing it, they themselves classify themselves in the lowest form of idolatry by trying to give life to non-living substances. That's what they say we are. We came from non-living substance, non-living matter. Psalm 115. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but unto thy name give glory, for thy mercy and for thy truth's sake. Wherefore should the heathen say, where is now their God? But our God is in the heavens. He hath done whatsoever he hath pleased. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they speak not. Eyes have they, but they see not. They have ears, but they hear not. Noses have they, but they smell not. They have hands, but they handle not. Feet have they, but they walk not. Neither speak they through their throat. They that make them are like unto them, so is every one that trusteth in them. trying to give life to a non-living substance. The psalmist said, they that make them are like unto them. In other words, they're dead. Evolutionists are dead as far as God's concerned because they're trying to give life to a non-living substance. They that make them are like unto them, so is everyone that trusteth in them. O Israel, trust thou in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. But verse 17 and 18, the dead praise not the Lord, neither any that go down into silence, but we will bless the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. Praise the Lord. That's what we say. Praise the Lord. Unto the King eternal.